Okay, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. I don't have any white lightning today, but I put the lime in the coconut rum, and so that's what I got.
I've got my Gatorade to recover from yard work in Houston, which standing outside for that long in Houston, you need your Gatorade. And then I've got my white lightning here.
The weather was good yard work weather last week, and I got a lot done, but it's a never-ending process. And now the weather has become very Texas. So
yeah. And we're at the point of year here, so it's so wet and humid and hot that if you mow on Sunday, by Friday you're already like in a jungle again, and the mosquitoes are pretty bad this year too. So
I haven't had that problem yet.
We're going to start with Wheel of Time, but I'm going to start both part 1 and 2 with something because someone from either audience might. I don't want either audience to miss it because I kind of watch. I watch Modern Wisdom, and every once in a while, him and 2 other gym guys get together and they do gym hacks. Well, some of them, I don't know, I find redundant. But I guess I'm a professional in the industry, so what seems obvious to me is not to everybody. So I kind of just skip forward when they're talking about something that I find redundant. But I got one of my own. One of the age-old questions is gloves or no gloves? And obviously you got the people out there that, I don't want man hands. And then you got the other side where you're wearing your sissy mittens. Well, here's my gym hack. No calluses, nothing on the hands, nice and smooth, and I never wear gloves. Spend $2, get you one of these in the cosmetic section of your local grocery store or department store. 30 seconds, twice a week in the shower when your hands are all wrinkly from being in the shower. Smooth hands, yet tough enough to grab the bar. That's my gym hack. Also, when calluses build up, that's when they rip.
Yeah.
So you still have that toughness, but they're not built up, so they grip the bar and then rip. So
I only rip mine when on certain lifts I need to take my ring off and I forget because it pinches in there, and that'll rip something open if I'm doing like heavy deads. I need to take my ring off or it'll pinch in and kind of rip things open.
Yeah, my ring's that way too because it's that big heavy duty tungsten.
That's the one I have.
I can't even wear it when I work because just picking up a bar feels like it's going to break my finger when it pushes up on that thick metal.
Yeah.
Now the glove debate takes a different turn if you do a lot of calisthenics on the bar, like your bar stars guys, you're doing all kinds of tricks on the pull-up bar, because the difference between deadlifts, rows, and all the gripping a bar stuff and the pull-up bar is a barbell moves in your hand. And so a lot of ripping is actually a sign of a weak grip because there's movement inside that gripped moment. Whereas you move around the bar because the bar is fixed on pull-ups.
Yeah.
So those guys that do a bunch of calisthenics on that, get some leather work gloves. It's better than gym gloves. Get some leather work gloves and use those. Or if you have sweaty palms and you don't want to fall off a bar, same thing. So when I get into my kick work, and as soon as I'm able from coming back from this, I'm going to start doing a whole bunch of those again.
Well, I try and do heavy farmers walks once a week at least to augment the grip so that doesn't happen.
The speaking of farmers walks, if you look down to my right, which would be the left, it might be the right on, I don't remember if I have it mirrored or not, but I put turf down in the gym, so now we can push the sled and do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wheel time.
All right, we should be able to finish with the ladies because their story's not that long. They do pop up here and there in Egwene's story because they talk to each other in the world of dreams. I do want to tease out a little bit something that's going to come up all throughout the series and way down the road, like the literally the very end of the series, your comments on the world of dreams has got me thinking a lot more about that and how important that is to the main plot, not just as an element of the story, but an integral part. And I'm going to pay attention to that more as we go through the series, because I was thinking about that more as I finished up my latest reread. And I've been thinking about that, about how to talk about these scenes as they come up, because we're going to start getting into that more and more and more when we get to Rand and Egwene's storyline, and go through that, because that's where she actually starts to learn rather than just kind of bumble along and figure it out for herself. And so we find out some more of the facts, the way that Jordan established the mechanics of the world of dreams, if you will. But first, chapter 38 is where we're starting. So that's page 616 in the paperback. And I love the title chapters, the titles of the chapters. Especially on rereads, you can get some hints and information just from the titles. So for instance, Hidden Faces, there's a double meaning here, because the first obvious meaning is the Domini veils, that one of the fashions is to wear veils, and it also helps in their, scheming to hide your face. So but the double meaning is that the other book I've got handy here is The Great Hunt, because we're going all the way back to the prologue of The Great Hunt, where everyone was wearing masks in that.
That was the prologue with boars, right?
Yep. That was the Dark Friend Tea Party. And in this chapter, we start with Ganon here, but then we switch to Caradin, and Leandrin shows up. So here in book 4, we're going all the way back to book 2 to pick some stuff up. Which is where, there's kind of an escalating complication here in the series, starting with this book, because these little tidbits that Jordan has been kind of sprinkling along the way, now he's going to start going back to that more and more, and those are going to start to become more and more important as the storylines of the Dark Friends and other smaller, and not just the Dark Friends, but here we've got Ganon, who we saw near the end of The Great Hunt. And now she's popping back in, and she's going to become a much more important character as she crosses into Elayne and Nyneave's storyline.
I'm looking at her pronunciation. I always pronounce it differently, and it's kind of a mixture between what you just did and what I was doing, because I always in my head was saying Aegeanin, and it's Aegeanin. Egg-e-anin.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I have no idea what the influence was on that.
Aegeanin.
That's
because the influence is on. Well, I mean, it's in Seanchan. It's slurred out, and it's not something that we're used to. Our mouths are used to producing. I mean, anybody who's ever tried to learn a different language, there's always those one or two sounds that you're like, we both have experienced Japanese, the RYU sound. It's like, I still can't even make it properly. But who was auditing in our Japanese class was this Japanese kid, and he would make fun of us. And when he was making fun of us, we'd banter back with, "Did you walk here or did you work here?" And he would be like, "Walk, walk, walk." And so just a little friendly banter around that subject.
It's extra fun and annoying with Jordan though, because he took influences from such a wide variety of sources with, the old tongue and with names, especially, that it gets really funky. So like when you read Tolkien, there are recurring themes there because he was an actual linguist and he was using, a bit of Gaelic, but especially Saxon and Germanic stuff. He took a lot of influence from that because he knew those he knew those dead languages, Old English and Saxon and various Germanic things. So once you kind of get the hang of it, you can pronounce Tolkien's stuff more easily because there's a theme. There's no one theme to Jordan's work because he was influenced by so many things. And as he said in some of his Q&As is, "Oh, well, I didn't even do that on purpose. I didn't think about that when I was doing it, but yeah, I can see the connection there." So a lot, he did a lot of things even that were just subconscious because it's, stuff he knew and kind of integrated into his work. Okay.
I was looking through the comments if there was anything that's relevant before spoiler section. Yeah. The only thing that's really not before spoilers is Scott was concerned, but we weren't around. That's why I was trying to push to get another one out.
Yeah.
We got 2 in the same week now, Scott. We're here.
So the first part of this, he's just setting the stage of what's going on here in Tanchico, that it's a big mess. That and we'd already known a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the map now, in my head, I'm in the right space now. In my head, I was mixed up. I was thinking of Ibudar because of the girl's storyline later.
Yeah.
But okay, now my head's in the right geographical place. Okay.
So everything's a big mess. And we get Egianen's perspective here. So I like when he does that, especially with the Seanchan, because it, like we kind of griped about with the sea folk and they become caricatures. He never goes away from the Seanchan for too long that they become caricatures, and it would be easy for them to do so because what little we know about their culture to this point is so alien to Western sensibilities, which is a lot of what this world is based on, because the main continent is kind of medieval Europe. So there are still some of those Western sensibilities, even, though we haven't reached, in Renaissance and Enlightenment and all that. But the Seanchan are a much more, we're not allowed to use this word anymore, but technically speaking, it's much more Oriental. In the geographical sense, that's where those influences come from. So they have very different views on personhood and where one stands in society.
It's an authoritarian collectivist society.
Yep. And so you get that from Egianen's perspective here. When she thinks about the Empress, you always get that from the Seanchan's point of view. every time there's mention of the Empress, even in their thinking, there's an extreme amount of reverence there. But I like the last line here on 622 of her section. So Agianan is kind of extra Seanchan because she's also a ship captain. So she's all about order, which is the main thing, the main positive the Seanchan bring. They just do it in a way that's kind of terrifying. So she's got a lot of distaste for what's going on in Tanchico, which she then extrapolates out to the whole continent of, the Empire needs to come and reclaim these lands and bring back order because the whole continent is a mess because of what she's seeing right here. But why was the High Lady Suroth holding back? Why? Well, we know that Suroth is a bad lady. Remembering back to her dealings with Liandrin and the way they spoke to each other, there was a familiarity there that lets you know that Suroth is a dark friend. The way she was connecting with Liandrin. And so if she's in charge now, then we know that the Shadow is using the Seanchan to their own ends as well. And we got a hint of that what book was that in? Because I purposely didn't mention it when we went over it because it was such a spoiler. But in one of Balzamon's rants, he says something about sending whispering in Hawkwing's ear and sending his army across the oceans to seal two dooms, one then and one to come. So there have been hints along the way to let you know that the Seanchan Empire and then what they're doing now in this return is part of the Shadow's plan to weaken the main continent, the main area where the focus of the last battle is going to be, because this is where the dragon was reborn.
Which makes it fitting that he goes right into Dark Friends after Agianan.
Yep. So it's probably not a coincidence, because Jordan being Jordan, that last line is referencing Suroth, and then here we go to the guy we know as Bors. Thinking about the horrible, terrible things that are being done to his family while he's trying to perform the tasks that have been set to him.
See what the big book says about him. That won't be a spoiler.
Yeah,
because you see some of his motivation is actually fear now, but what his original motivation to be a dark friend is an interesting question.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we frequently get motivations for why they turn to the Shadow, and they're varied, which makes sense. There are some that are just sadists. That's why they like the Shadow, because they want to indulge their evilness and their cruelty. But then others, the promise of immortality or power, or status or wealth or whatever, all bring others to the Shadow. And then again, mentioning Suroth going into the Dark Friends, and then Caradin bumps into Liandrin. Not so much bumps into as she shows up and threatens him some more.
Well, which complicates things, because he just put the new Penarch in place to be in control, and she's going to kill her, per her words. So
yep.
conflicting plans, but she has the say. She's the higher ranking, it seems.
Mhm. Well, we also get a little bit, you glean from Carradin's perspective here that he's not just working for himself and for the shadow, that he is still a white cloak, and he is still following uh orders from Niall, which we saw briefly when Pedro and Niall, I think that was the prologue of the Dragon Reborn.
Mhm.
But the so 627 is when Leandrin comes in and threatens him unless he does what she wants, and sweat popped out on his face. Not just a despised Tarvalon witch, Black Ajah. She was Black Ajah. So I like that the couple of times we meet White Cloak Dark Friends, they still think about Aes Sedai as witches. They still have that white cloakness ingrained in them.
Mhm. Well, and it's an interesting little kind of mind fuck he's got in his head, because all regular white cloaks that are not dark friends think of Aes Sedai as witches because they're all inherently dark friends. But he knows for a fact that there are dark friend ones and not dark friend ones, but he still has that
Yeah.
same exact white cloak thought. He knows there's a difference.
Yeah. But he still got that ingrained in his mind that he thinks it to himself. So as you mentioned, the other thing you glean from this is that the shadow has different motivations, different people, and he's already laid that groundwork with seeing the seeing them meeting in that kind of weird dreamscape that we're not exactly sure what it is, at least not at this point. So Rand sees it in his nightmares. We get a little bit of that place of ramps and that weird Escher painting in blackness. But then Perrin goes there, is taken there by Hopper when he's in the wolf dream, to show that the Forsaken are meeting together, and they don't get along. So even before we start to meet the individual Forsaken and get to know a little bit more about them, we can tell from the outside looking in that they don't get along. And then at the end of the Dragon Reborn, we see that What's His Bucket and Balsamon have different plans. That Balsamon wants Rand to take Kalendor and proclaim himself as the Dragon Reborn, because that's part of his plan to set things in motion towards the last battle, to ultimately win, to ultimately turn him. But Balal wants him to take it so that he can kill Rand and then take Kalendor, which is not what Balsamon wants at all. He still wants to turn him.
Well, it's pretty almost prophetic, because what you see with entropic movements is all that infighting. Look at today's postmodernist movement that's going on. I saw a paper written, and this was not a hoax paper, a paper written that because of the patriarchy, fluid dynamics is not as understood of a field as mechanical physics, because men have a penis, so they can only understand the mechanical, and women are the key to understanding fluid dynamics because of the fluid nature of the insides of their female parts. This was a legit scientific paper in one of these not so scientific publications, theoretically. So this was real. Again, it wasn't a hoax paper. But so this is where the infighting comes in. You got to admit that men have a penis and women have a vagina for that patriarchal assumption to be true. And so now we cross into the trans movement. Women have 9-inch penises, and they don't go together. And those two entities have the same ultimate goal, but can't agree with each other.
Yeah.
So entropic movements tend to be this way, which is, I mean, obviously we get to a title of a book later, The Lord of Chaos, right? So it's kind of the natural order of things.
Yep. The natural order of chaos that and that kind of starts to reveal more about the nature of the Dark One that we've talked about, that the creator is like pure order and he's pure chaos. And we see that and it's I think to this point, I think we've gotten a few hints that the Dark One doesn't care if his followers fight with each other, because to him that's to the good, because it means the strong will come out on top. It will reveal who is the stronger. But the subtext there is that he also doesn't care because he doesn't care about them. He cares about the chaos they create.
Well, and we get little hints of greater plans. So we look, you know, the God's plan, right? We see greater plans amongst the more supreme beings, like the Dark One and the Creator, using the different tools. So the Seanchan, you alluded to from Balzamon's rantings, are a tool to be used to create more chaos, but they're using chaos to create the motivation for the Seanchan to take over. They supply order, and that's kind of their driving force, as we saw at the beginning of this chapter. And so it's we even see it with the world of dreams. It seems chaotic if you're just new to the world of dreams. But we also see that through Egwene's progression later, that you can create order within the world of dreams if you know how. I think I took us a far afield, but
yeah, that's what we do.
Well, but yeah, you see it because Carradine was there to create chaos by creating basically infighting in the streets by placing the new Penarch. Leandrin's there to kill the new Penarch, which would create more chaos. And and that conflicts with the two of them, like you said, plans not aligning, but it still ends up with the ultimate goal of creating chaos.
Yeah. Well, and he's also still walking that line because we found out Niall's plans in the prologue of The Dragon Reborn, that he's trying to create chaos so that he can have the White Cloaks come in to be the savior and take control, extend their control out of Amnesia.
I guess that's what I was trying to say about the Seanchan, that the Forsaken are trying to create chaos in Tanchico so that the Seanchan come in as the savior to actually move their own plan, which is to disrupt Rand's, the dragon uniting the land,
right?
Which has to happen in the prophecies of the dragon,
right? Because in order to fight that chaos, there needs to be order opposing it. The nations need to come together, stop fighting each other, unite behind the dragon, because they are vastly outnumbered. Not only outnumbered, but then each individual monster is more powerful. You know, the Trollocs.
You're speaking Trollocs versus humans.
Yeah. Trolloc is, you know, a Trolloc by himself is like a heavy cavalry. A heavy cavalryman, just, you know, 8 foot tall, big and strong, able to do a lot of damage. And then the Madral, which are freakishly dangerous, and then all these other things that we've started to meet, like the Drakkar and the Gray Men. And
Well, I think the best description of Trollocs from what they are compared to humans standpoint is the fist fight between Loyal and the Trolloc, because Loyal's an ogre, and we get many descriptions of how large and powerful they are, and he bested the Trolloc in a battle of sheer strength, but only just barely.
And he was quite winded afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of Seanchan, we get back to them on 634, and we get some more about their culture with this seeker. So obviously, authoritarian communitarian society, they've got a secret police. They all do. That's their thing. And he hints that I don't know how much to go into here because I'm trying to remember the order of which things are.
Well, let's just put it as he's suspicious of Elayne, and more to come on this guy.
Yeah,
because I think there are some spoilers involved with him, but we're going to learn part of it from her, I think, here soon. Because this is this the book where we learned the dirty secret?
Well, no, we saw it at the end of the Great Hunt when Egwene escaped, and she explained that she had had a lot of time to think, and she'd given it a lot of thought, so she'd realized that the Soldam were able to learn to channel, and Domine were those with the spark.
Okay, so then we can say it, since we already learned that this is, he hints that he knows what she's hiding.
Well, he hints that something is being hidden, but as she says, you know, in her thoughts, it doesn't look like anything has been disturbed in the basement, and she finds it hard to believe that if he had gone down there and seen what was going on, that he wouldn't have done something about it, let alone said something about it. So he might not know this dirty little secret.
Which is funny, because with all the clues that there would be, this is where, you know, authoritarian regimes almost create a religious blindside. Because they mask it as this person's been doing the job for so long that they develop an affinity for their domain. Or is it domine? I think it's domine. I think there's an end to it. I'll look in the pronunciation here in a little bit, but they develop an affinity, and so they create this story around this thing that seems to exist in order to not delve deeper. Whereas, oops, someone popped that bubble, and so it's the dirty little secret that nobody knows the secret.
And we see a difference here in
it's Dominique.
Yeah. It's just gonna be hard to correct in my head because I've been saying it wrong for so long in my head. Anyway,
and even the second syllable is the emphasis, Damani.
Yeah. So we see a difference in the reaction too, because Elayne is a different kind of person, a different kind of thinker. And I think this goes back to her being a ship captain. So she's all about order. That's why she loves and respects the Empire. But there's also a degree of autonomy there, because when you're out in the middle of nowhere with nothing but blue surrounding you, you're on your own. You have to think and act and work for yourself. So when she encounters this secret, it gives her pause. Now we've seen so far through this chapter that she's still a loyal Imperial soldier, but she's having to think about some things here. Because
well, she also was just had evidence slammed into her face. It wasn't just, I know the secret to this thing that is going on in your society. It was, holy crap, it's right there in front of me. I can't ignore this. And realistically, she's been trying, but
there is a little bit, unless I missed something here. How did Bethamin get the collar on in the first place? And why would Elayne have done that?
isn't Bethamin the one that
See,
Egwene collared?
That's why I have this here. Rena and Seda were the ones that were collared in Egwene's room when they were leaving. So we have those two where we, the reader, found out about the dirty little secret of the Saldam.
I guess that's where a reread comes in, because I always just assumed it was the ones that were.
So we're gonna find out, I think, in the Lord of Chaos, where Lord of Chaos or Crown of Swords, where Bethamin came from, because we're gonna get kind of from her perspective a little bit in one of those books. So I don't want to go too much into what happened to her, but Jordan is showing us that this secret is already starting to spread, because we had those two at the end of the Great Hunt, and now we've got a third here, and then a fourth with Elayne knowing about it. But we have a third Saldam that has been collared. I don't think, though, we ever find out how and why Bethamin got collared in the first place, because that just seems like a very, very odd thing that Elayne would have done.
Okay, so we're treading on spoiler territory, and we've got about 15 minutes left to an hour. So let's push forward, and then we'll revisit Bethamin, who I'm looking up in the big book right now. Oh, she's got a long section. Hold on. All right. So we get back to the girls. They all reconnect, or they all connect. Is it a reconnection with Elayne? I know it's a reconnection with Doman, but
both. So they run into Doman, and he's going to help them. So they run into him on the docks, and he helps them find an inn, which is difficult to do because it's so overcrowded and chaotic in the city. And then later, while they're out doing their investigating, they get set upon by Elayne's minion, Gelb, the guy she was talking to at the beginning of the chapter. And then she comes to their rescue because she doesn't want to have to deal with his over eagerness and greediness, capturing some poor woman that is not who she's looking for, which she's had to deal with before.
Okay, it does give a hint about where Bethamin comes in.
Okay.
Mark that page. Okay. What was the last thing you said? Sorry, I was reading.
I was just summing up how Elayne is going to meet the girls, but before that, we get a World of Dreams scene.
Yeah, and I think I'm in the right place. This is another moment where we really get a heap and helping of how the World of Dreams mechanics work when it comes to need.
Yes, and so presumably, so 652 is where Nyneave, she's gone to meet Egwene, she's not there, and then suddenly she goes from the stone to the waste. But that is probably just a stray thought because she's thinking about Egwene. And so then she pops over to Verdine, which we know about at this point. We know quite a bit about at this point, but she does not. And then Birgit shows up to warn her to get away because somebody is down there looking at the fog and he is dangerous.
And we'll find out who that is by the end of this book. Birgitte. That's how you pronounce her name, according to the glossary. Which is really close to the German pronunciation of Bridget.
Which is interesting because there's also I believe a Celtic hero with a name very similar to that, a female hero of myth. But before we leave that, we kind of cross the streams again here on 654, that the way she gets out of the dream is she ends up in Emmons Field and she's seeing all the changes that have happened because of Perrin's storyline. And then she rounds a corner, and what she did not expect at all was a man in a dark coat trotting toward her less than 100 paces down the hard-packed dirt street. Her breath caught. Lan? No, but he had the same shape to his face, the same eyes. Halting, he raised his bow and shot at her. And that's what makes her leap out of the World of Dreams. And we've encountered this person before, and so these storylines have crossed, but of course she has no idea what's going on here because she has no knowledge of Slayer, who Perrin has been chasing around.
And even when you get a perspective from Slayer later, you still don't really get exactly how it happened.
About how
the merging happened.
Yeah. How Luke and Slayer are the same person. Yeah. So yeah, that's a big deal. And you do get towards the end, you get some scenes from his perspective, and it's still a little murky. All right, but let's take a quick pause here and then we can finish this up. Okay, so we're going to skip forward to chapter 51, which is the next chapter for Nyneave and Elayne's storyline. So I think the more interesting thing, the most interesting part of this to me is Revelations in Tanchico, which is, again, lots of meanings there, because the first revelation is who Elayne is, because Doman walks in and he recognizes her, because it's hard to forget. So I think this is kind of your wheelhouse. So I assume you have thoughts on how Nyneave reacts here.
Tell me how she reacts.
Well, the main thing over and over, you know, through the next few chapters, while she, you know, kind of very slowly and begrudgingly um softens to Egianin, is that darn you, I liked you.
Mhm.
That's really what made her mad, is that she partly she feels betrayed because she really hates the Seanchan because of what they did to Egwene, who is like a, you know, younger sister to her, that she helped raise. And so she really hates the Seanchan because of that. And Egianin hid that from her. But so there's that surface level betrayal, but then she has a deeper revulsion because I like this person.
Mhm.
This person that I'm supposed to hate, this person that I want to hate, but I've sat with her, I've talked with her. She was, you know, interested in learning about Aes Sedai and the One Power. And she, you know, she was interesting and friendly, and we've had this time together, and so I like her. And so I think there's an element of being mad at herself, and I think we see that a lot when Nyneave gets really upset, is
Well,
that there's a big element of that.
there's always a self-protection analysis we have in our mind. You know, when you do find out you've been duped in some way, shape, or form, that it's a natural response to try to figure out how you got duped. But then add the conflict to it of the fact that she had a certain idea about a certain people.
Mhm.
And when she actually conversed with a person from that certain people, they were human too. There's actually a lesson we can all learn in this.
Yeah.
You know, it's sometimes when you sit down with somebody from the other side of the aisle, you do realize that they are a person too. And the caricature you have in your mind is kind of destroyed. Now, on a grander note, now she wants to have that caricature of the others,
Mhm.
because there is some need for that, because there is a war going on.
Yes.
You know, and there is a bigger, badder, grander scheme on the other side of that. But again, it's the Christmas truce all over again,
Mhm.
in one person's mind. Now you've got to turn around and shoot the other side after you've been exposed to the fact that they're people.
Yeah.
And damn you for making me think that way.
Mhm. Uh,
I got a little taste of that. Granted, nobody was killing anybody, but meeting people before you had to fight them, and knowing the person you had to fight. You know, you still stepped in the ring, and the difference between MMA and other sports is the goal is to hurt somebody else enough that they give up, or
mhm.
they can't continue. Whereas in like football, the goal is to score a touchdown, but people get hurt in the process. The goal is not to
Yes.
hurt somebody. And so, you know, again, I told the story of walking up to the ring and the coach trying to tell me all these stories about the guy. And I was like, yeah, he was actually kind of cool. You know, how about my motivation just be not wanting to lose? Well, most
Good
people can't
motivation.
handle that, because I have to cause harm in able to not lose, to not lose. And in this case, we've got a war going on where everybody's dying in the process. Chaos ensues. And now, damn it, I like you, but I have to hate what you represent.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard thing for people to deal with.
Uh, yeah. Speaking of hard things to deal with, page 839 down on the bottom is Nyneave um, questioning her. And why have you tried to wiggle your way into our trust like some egg-eating snake? Uh, that was never my intention, Egianin said stiffly. All I ever wanted from you was to learn about Aes Sedai. For the first time, she seemed hesitant, unsure of herself. Compressing her lips, she looked from Nyneave to Elayne and shook her head. You are not as I was taught. The light be upon me. I like you. That's a big effing deal for her, because as we've already seen this, and we see it even more, and it becomes much more explicit when we start to encounter other Damani, especially ones that are Seanchan.
Damani.
Well, it's gonna take a while.
It does sound more sexy that way.
Yeah.
Damani.
These aren't people. That's how they justify this. I mean, there's an element of American slavery here.
I was just going to bring that up because Jordan being from the American South,
is okay. We have to justify this because we need it. It's necessary. The Soldam wielding the one power is what created the empire. It's where its strength comes from. It's how they were able to crush anyone that came against them at Falm. So it has to be rationalized. But for Egianin, it's I have to rethink everything I thought I knew.
And it's still all over the world. I mean, this is a concept that it's a deep concept, but it's how basically every great conflict has been presented, I should say. You know, we've got this one sounds silly, but I think it will have long-term ramifications. We have the Chinese message to their young men as the South Korean men as veggie boys, because the South Korean men have been more feminized. They're more androgynous. See the Islamic nation and infidels, or our idea of all Islam as the perception of radical Islam. So we see it all over the world. You brought up slavery, but those are modern examples.
Well, slavery's still very modern.
Yeah, I was going to say the Uyghurs
Sadly.
in China. You know.
Well, their slavery is still widespread throughout the Middle East and Africa, and then that's just kind of old-fashioned slavery and indentured servitude, like we think of. But now you have a very high number of sex slaves, specifically sex slaves, throughout the world, Latin America and in Asia especially.
Yeah, North Korea.
That's really gross and creepy.
And we've talked about this in other episodes where we talk about possibly the acceptance of that from China with respect to North Korea. Is China has a lot of young men that have no female counterparts, and keeping the populace happy would be it'd be very advantageous to have sex slavery. It doesn't make it right, but it's advantageous to the authoritarian government.
Yeah. And the dark irony there is that they still bring up and criticize and make a big deal about the atrocities the Japanese committed in China during World War II, and it was for the same reasons. You dehumanize people, you other them, and you can do whatever you want to them. And we've already been given hints of this about how long Aes Sedai live, but it's going to become more explicit later when it is explained just how old some of these people are. So if you are collared for your life, that's a very long life to be treated like a dog. Literally, you are on a leash and you are treated like a dog. You are treated like an animal. And for others that we're going to meet, that has to be rationalized. But for Egianin, we have a different kind of person here. And so she says, I've got to rethink everything.
Well, she was hit with two hard truths. One was that this thing they demonized can actually be done by people who are responsible for doing it. And I know I talked in a circle there, but the people who are needed to make that system happen can also do the thing that is demonized. And the other hard truth is the same thing as Nyneave. She met the enemy on a personal level and realized that they weren't that different. And both of those two things are going through both ladies' minds.
Yep. And just on a side note, same thing with good old Doman. One of our favorite doobie doo side characters is, so we kind of, I don't know I can't remember exactly where it is, but Rendra, the innkeeper, makes mention that Doman runs several soup kitchens for the poor throughout the city, that for every tax and tariff that he dodges by being a smuggler, he spends twice as much giving to the needy. And it makes them kind of reevaluate him, because Elayne, Little Miss Princess, she obviously doesn't like someone who's evading the taxes. And then Egyanin is very much law and order, so she really doesn't like a smuggler. But he's a properly set up man, as she says later.
Well, one of the great debates we've had in modern philosophy is the archetype versus the ration and reason. And what Jordan did amazingly well in his series is creating archetypes within the characters' minds. They're not the archetype, but they have archetypes in their mind, and then conflicting those archetypes with them. So they have to ration and reason through. So he kind of combined the debate. We all do tend to become caricatures based on how we were raised, or what country we live in, or, I'm contemplating getting a cowboy hat before I go to Britain here in a couple of months, because we're going to a wedding and I'm going to wear a suit with cowboy boots and a cowboy hat, because yeehaw, man.
They're handy for doing yard work.
Oh, I've got my my old school, like you're studying frogs in the Amazon hat with the floppy. It gets wet, but it's just flops around instead of actually getting.
I had a sombrero that I wore when I worked in the pipe yard, and the Mexicans would laugh and call me Pancho Villa. All right, so we do get some of this at chapter 52, with Nyneave literally talking to herself when she goes into the world of the dreams. She made me like her, and I cannot stop, and I hate her for it. So that, I mean, we get it right from the horse's mouth there, that's really what's got her goat, is that she can't stop liking her, and she wants to. But then we get some of the interesting powers and abilities of dreamwalkers at the bottom of 852. You try entering Teleron Riad while half asleep in a saddle. It is morning in the threefold land, and we are on the move. So she's not only does she not need the Tarangriel that Nyneave and Elayne have to use, but she can do it while only half asleep, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's basically zoning out. It's daydreaming.
Yeah, it's there are a number of animals that sleep literally with their eyes open.
Was it ducks that sleep one side at a time?
I think there are some birds that do that. Yeah.
We've got our guard duck out front. There's a duck that hangs out, and every time someone comes to the door, like, your guard duck's here again. As long as it doesn't lay eggs in our yard, because then it takes forever to get him out of there. Okay, so.
All right, so then we get an explanation of what the girls have already done accidentally, which is need. Of how that works, and how lucky they were to not have something bad happen. Okay. Um, yeah, and so 856 is when Egwene uh admits that, recognizes that she did that before I met you, before we went to Tyr.
Mhm.
That's how she ended up there. Um, I like the interaction here between Nyneave and the wise ones, that she kind of criticizes Egwene. You must keep a close eye on Egwene, she told them, hugging the younger woman to show she meant it fondly. You are right, Byre. She will do more than she knows how. She has always been that way. For some reason, Byre arched a white eyebrow at her. I do not find her so, Amos said in a dry voice. She is a biteable student now. Is that not so, Egwene? So Egwene has already become one of them.
Mhm.
And so, and they're now viewing Nyneave, her sister, as a fellow Aes Sedai, uh, quote quote, wink wink, supposedly is the outsider here. So there's the reflexive rallying around her when there's a bit of criticism there.
Uh, well, I think as we're about to move on from this little spot, there's only one other point I'd like to interject. Uh, you we'll have to look at the pronunciation. I always said bear,
Yeah.
fire, uh, but it's the point that you don't have to have the power to dream walk.
Yeah.
Because she was not able to use the power, but she could still dream walk.
And is incredibly powerful in the world of dreams. That we'll see more of that later. And then there are others who can as they use the saying, barely channel enough to light a candle, and they're still strong dreamwalkers as well. So 860. I want to jump to that real quick.
Yeah, because we got to get to closing so we can do our spoilers and then.
There's a nice slow buildup here of she's secretly watching this woman, and she's thinking to herself, and something weird starts to happen to her. And then she realizes that, one of the scenes we skipped over to try and get here is when, however you pronounce Moggy, came in and used compulsion on the girls to find out what they knew and then have them not remember their conversation. And Nyneave is so strong-willed that she's actually able to break through that block.
Well, and it's another important thing because it takes care of a plot hole. Nyneave needs to be angry to channel, and her knowledge of that manipulation makes her angry every time, which makes her perfect. It makes it a perfect way to have somebody be able to fight with the weapon she needs every time.
Yeah. So once she realizes this, 861, Nyneave shook her head. Whoever the woman was, she had no time. Opening herself to Sidar, she turned, filled overflowing with the run power and righteous wrath. But she's gone. And then Birgit shows up again. I will never forget, and she tells her what's going on. I will never forget Moghidian's face any more than I will forget the face of Asmodine, the man who you almost disturbed in Ruidine. So we don't know how this woman of legend is here. What are you doing here? I know that you all vanished after the Horn of Valir called you, but you are dead. Those of us who are bound to the wheel are not dead as others are dead. Um, and they wait in the world of dreams to be spun out again. So she already explains all that, and she's going to try and help because she likes Nyneave. I like that Guidal Kane shows up and is grumbling about how she's not supposed to do this, but she's going to do it anyway.
Not quite ready for the Guidal Kane meme cover.
Yep.
We need Ulver first.
All right. So
and then all shit breaks loose. And it culminates with Nyneave and Moggy meeting in the real world, right?
yes, and they have a knockdown drag out. So we see the crazy power of Nyneave, that she has this. It's like she has a fight for the belt, and then immediately has to fight a challenger. Right, because a Black Ajash shows up wielding some Tyron Griel that can fling balefire around, and so something we get here that is just hinted at if you're paying attention is that you can break a shield, because Nyneave had her shielded, had it tied off, and had her bound and gagged, and she starts freaking out when the balefire starts flying around. And she's somehow able to break free and get out of there.
Well, you do learn later, and it's not super spoiler here, but as we learn more about Moggy, this is kind of her wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Breaking out of shields, creating shields that are unbreakable, and we see that coming forward. So it's not completely something that's out of the blue.
Yeah.
But Nyneave, this is a good shot about her ignorance, is she didn't know it was even possible.
Yes.
She figured if she tied it off, it was
she
there.
was done. Yeah, she had her at her mercy and could come back for later.
Which, if she was really full Aes Sedai, she would have known, because otherwise they wouldn't have their ring to keep men shielded, where they constantly rotate through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. And then that gets wrapped up with them being victorious. Nyneave joins up with the others, and then they take this male Adam that they figure out and give it to Doman and Gyanin, and they're going to go dump it in the deepest part of the sea that they can find. And then so that is that. All is well.
All is well. Spoilers. Okay, so at this point, we'll go to the spoiler section.
Yeah.
Spend a couple minutes on that, and then we can do a quick part two. Oh, Bethamin.
Yes.
So looked up Bethamin. She's quite tall for a woman, 5'7".
Mm-hmm.
Wavy hair. It explicitly says she fills out the bosom of her dress in the Jordan fashion. He always comments on the bosom. He is obviously a boob dude. Now, what it says about her capture is she actually deserted during the Battle of Falmey,
Mm-hmm.
which would give motive to Elayne to try to capture her in some way. And so with that motive, you can imply that she threw an Adam on her to even just hold her down, and figured out that it did the same thing.
That's kind of the best guess. It still seems odd to me that Elayne would have done that in the first place. Unless, like you said, unless she knew or strongly suspected.
Well, did
Bethamin
she see the other two?
Bethamin did. We find that out later, from Bethamin's perspective, is that she walked in on
we can
them.
imply maybe a confession.
Maybe. Or like you said, maybe when Elayne confronted her,
It was the only thing she had at her disposal,
and yeah, Bethaman freaked out and he tried to fight her or tried to flee. Um, and so then she used it, not expecting it to hold her, just
or she caught her in conventional means and put her to the question.
yeah. So
And then
yes,
when that something like that came up, and like, well, let's try it out.
yeah, but we find out later that Bethaman walked in and saw Rena and Seda, and then freaked out, backed away, and ran because Falm was the fecal matter was hitting the rotating blades at that point, and so the people were running anyway.
So to the comments, the second comment from Scott. So he does these things in order of watching the video. So I don't know I can't remember what this is in reference to, but he said the event you're referring to in later books is a really big deal. And I understand how that becomes a real calendar marker. Do you remember what that was? It was very early.
Yeah, I was referring to the cleansing.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because that happens at the end of Winter's Heart, and then in Crossroads, we get a number of scenes of people noticing what's going on because it's so much power that people around the world can sense it and go, what's that over there?
Yeah. Then we got Ann Landers. That was the name we were trying to think of. Anla, the advisor or the counselor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott, for that one. But apparently he said she's the sister to Dear Abby. I did not know that. He's got the same thoughts of the sea folk just being kind of left out there. Then we go into Star Wars and MCU. Yeah, I pretty much agree across the board there. But again, the wokeism is the broader sense of ruined storytelling. Don't expect anything good out of Disney going forward. And then he comments on the fly on my head. I had a Mike Pence moment, you know.
Yeah. Fly season in Texas. Are you a fellow Texican? It was unseasonably nice for a couple of weeks there because a northern front blew in, which blows out the humidity, and now the wind's blowing from the south, and so just standing around, my jocks are getting swampy.
Yeah, and we need that. Is it an El Nino year or a La Nina?
I can't remember.
Because the El Nino years, we get that northern dry air come in, and that's actually what keeps the hurricanes out.
Yeah.
Because then they come up the Gulf and then they just turn north with that high pressure air that's in there. So hopefully it's one of those years. It was looking like that through March and April, but then we got this almost hurricane-like weather recently. We had 60-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
In the last storm. So 75, you've got a hurricane. So any other spoilers?
Not that I can think of that I really want to go into. This, I mean, as evidenced by the fact that it is far and away the shortest of the three storylines in the Shadow Rising, it's really more setup than anything.
Yeah, we talked about that in the beginning.
Yeah, that we're setting up Elayne and Nyneave being over here, and now they're gonna have to travel back, which is how they end up here, when they need to be, and stuff happens along the way.
Well, I think there's more to the setup. I think the dynamic with Nyneave and Mohidian.
Yes, that's a big setup. It seems like it looks like it's going to have a conclusion, but then obviously it doesn't because she gets away. So it's setting up her to come back again later and be more impactful. It's setting up Birgit, who's going to be a big player going forward. And then it just reinforces how stupidly powerful Nyneave is when she's literally half trained.
Yeah, Moggy on the reread became one of my favorite Forsaken. It's probably no surprise that Grendel was one of the other ones. Giggity. They better cast her right, by the way. I'm thinking someone like Kate Upton would be perfect there.
Will we even get that far? Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows?
If Lord of the Rings bombs as much as I hope it does, that may upend a lot of things. Because yes, Prime Studios is cheating because it has Amazon money, but you can only lose so much before people notice and say, hey, stop that. And they've, I don't know how much they put into Wheel of Time, but the Rings of Power was reportedly $1 billion deal. That they invested $1 billion in what I think was supposed to be a 5-year program.
Well, I'm not going to put any time and effort into watching that one.
Nope.
We already have a good theatrical version of Lord of the Rings. I don't need to watch a remake.
Yep.
We did not have that for Wheel of Time. So I think it is our job to rip it apart.
Yep. And if you want expanded universe Lord of the Rings, you can go play Lord of the Rings Online, which has a lot of fun lore and cool things in it, and is now free to play. But we don't get much of that in the Wheel of Time. The only kind of expanded universe thing we get is there was a D20 system tabletop game, and that book actually was pretty good.
Yeah, it wasn't horrible.
Filling in details, giving you some mechanics of how the systems of the game work, and actually having good artwork. with how much we complain about how mostly terrible the artwork of the cover artwork is, the artwork in that book is pretty darn good.
Yeah, it was bad timing is what it was. Tabletop games kind of had a drop, and then there were a lot that came out at that same time, because that was about the time Warhammer came out too.
Yeah, I think 3rd edition D&D, and then Warhammer got big, so there was there's a little bit of a boom there in that kind of gaming.
Well, and all the tabletop Dungeons and Dragons players, they had a choice to make. Just do a regular D&D type structure with a storyline that went along with Wheel of Time, or switch to a whole new structure. And I think a lot of them, at least a good chunk of them, said, we'll just keep playing D&D and have this little little thing as a reference tool to make a good story.
The biggest problem I had with it is they just squished the channeling system into the D&D magic system, and they don't work right. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel like it does in the books. Which is I think one of the reasons I found the series so appealing, is because my exposure before then was Tolkien, where magic is very fuzzy and not really explained, and then D&D, which is very rigid and a little too explained. And
with the magic system, I brought up, we were texting the other day because I started playing instead of watching TV in my playtime. We talk about reading for fun and reading for knowledge, and there's multiple ways to do that. And I still read mostly hard books for the knowledge, but in my fun time, I started playing Dragon Age Origins again, the Dragon Age series, because I hear there's a 4 coming out next year. Which I'll have to get a PS5 for. So hopefully it's a good summer business wise, but
good luck finding one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got a year to get one. I could put it on back order if I really want to. But the point of it is, when we talk about the magic system, I would, other things in the game lead me to this conclusion too, but I wouldn't be surprised. I know there are Dragon Age books, but I wouldn't be surprised if the biggest influence for that franchise was Wheel of Time, because the way the magic works and everything, it actually is very similar to the different weaves and the patterns, and there's overlap between them, and it's actually quite cool. But then there's other things that lead me, like one of the main protagonists in the Origins is named Loghain. The Circle of Magi is very similar to the White Tower, along those lines. Now, obviously, there's similarities in the base mythology behind it, but it's the way that's why I like that game so much. Now, you brought up Final Fantasy. I said it's the second best to Witcher of a game, but I guess I should specify it's the second best that you can play offline. My biggest problem with Final Fantasy 14 is you have to play with people online. You can't just, I'm going to have a chill play a game day where I'm going to just be to myself and have a story that I can be 100% in control of.
They fixed that in later expansions, but they haven't gone back and applied it to the earlier stuff.
Really, the later ones, you can not have to form your group and everything.
You can go in with NPCs for those those main story dungeons and trials.
See, that would have changed everything for me.
And that starts with Shadowbringers, the expansion that you can't get to work for some reason.
Yeah, for some reason, if anybody has knowledge of this, I bought the full thing that had all the expansions on it, and I have the CD and everything, and Shadowbringers being the last one, but I got through, what was the one before Shadowbringers? Stormblood. I got through that, and it won't let me play Shadowbringers. So if anybody's got the fix for that, let me know.
All right. Well, you wanted to do a part 2 with some other stuff?
Yeah, real world stuff.
All right. Well, then let's pause there, and thank y'all. Mostly Scott. Someone else comment. Let us know if you're paying attention to these Wheel of Time rereads.
Now, we have a comment on our other real world one, so let me bring that up before we get back to it. But hey, thank y'all. Obviously, in the Wheel of Time stuff, we give. Oh, Scott did make a comment about getting injured reading books. He said his carpal tunnel is Jordan's responsible for it. I think you could also get a paper cut. Some postural issues. We might talk some fitness here in a second.
All right.
Later.